Advent is not a penitential season. Advent is not a season of penance.
Really? Are you sure about that, Father? Welcome everybody. It is the Friday after Thanksgiving, or as we in the United States like to call it, Black Friday. So you know that spirit of joy and Thanksgiving that we cultivated yesterday, yeah, we just take all that and throw it out the window because it's America and we want more! All right, so I'm gonna get this out of the way up front. Technically, Father Schmitz is kind of correct. The current canons in place in the Code of Canon Law only define Lent as a penitential season. Oh, but that's just a technicality in the Roman Catholic Church. That funny little law was only recently defined in 1983. But what did the Church teach before that? Before we jump into the history, tell me if a few of these practices sound familiar. During this season, the Gloria is omitted from the liturgy. The proper vestments for liturgy are violet, representative of penance, and on Gaudete or Laetare Sunday, the appropriate vestments are rose. The use of the organ is supposed to be restricted. Floral decoration at the altar should be restricted or moderated. Does that sound familiar to you? Because it should. When are the only other times we see those practices in place? That's right, during the penitential season of Lent. But guess what? Those rules are also in place for the season of Advent. But I guess since the Code of Canon Law doesn't include Advent as a penitential season, I guess it's not penitential, even though the character of the liturgy is distinctly penitential. But let's keep going down this rabbit hole, because history is fun. So, we all know the basics. Advent is a separate season in the Roman liturgical calendar that is 4 weeks prior to the Feast of the Nativity, which leads us into the season of Christmas. Side note, Catholics, Christmas is a season, it's not just one day. We celebrate Christmas beginning on the Vigil of the Nativity all the way up to the Epiphany. So don't take your trees down. Don't stop celebrating. We're Catholic. We fast hard, we feast hard. Anyway, that's Advent, the season that leads us to the Nativity. But where did it come from? Why did we start doing Advent? Well, we're going to go all the way back in time now. I'm going to go back just to the 6th century because that's when I really found a lot of documents. So at the Second Council of Tours in 567 AD, the Church developed the practice of Quadragesima Sancti Martini, or the 40 days of St. Martin, or St. Martin's Lent. And this was a time when the Church would practice fasting and abstinence from November 12th, the Feast of St. Martin, all the way up until the Feast of the Nativity. Then at the Synod of Macon, which was from 581 to 583, the Church ordered that from the 11th of November all the way to the Feast of the Nativity, the Mass was to be offered according to the Lenten rite on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Later synods made additional laws about fasting and abstinence during this time. Fast forward a couple hundred years, Pope Gregory VII reduced the time period of Advent from 5 weeks to 4 weeks. Pope Innocent III, in his letter to the Bishop of Braga, mentioned the custom of fasting during the whole of Advent. Pope Urban V insisted that all the clerics in his court fast and abstain during the whole season of Advent. In fact, all Fridays in Advent were once designated as obligatory days of fasting and abstinence for Catholics. The Church even observed something called Ember Days, where the Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday after December 13th were days of fasting and abstinence. And even the 1917 Code of Canon Law required fasting on the Vigil of the Nativity. Now, when do we fast? When are we mandated to fast as Catholics? That's right, during penitential seasons. So while the current Code of Canon Law doesn't include Advent in its list of penitential seasons, it really overlooks the rich history and tradition of the Church and the season of Advent. And you look at the Church Universal here, the Eastern churches, that's right Catholics, it's not just the Roman Catholic Church, the Catholic Church is all over the place. The Eastern churches have their own laws that designate which seasons are and are not penitential. And at least in the Byzantine Church, Advent is a penitential season. In fact, they're fasting right now. Starting on November 15th, they started observing Philip's fast. So I feel a particular need to emphasize the penitential character of the Advent season in my own life. And maybe you do too. Even though it may not technically be listed as a penitential season, the liturgical character is pretty clear. It is one of penitence. But I'm no canonist, I'm no liturgist, so if there are any canon lawyers out there, or people who know a lot more than I do, I'd love to see the history of this broken open. And in fact, I'd like to see when exactly it changed, because I can't find any documentation on it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that the church is really terrible at putting things online in a timely manner. What do you guys think? Have you been taught that Advent is a penitential season? Because I know I have. It wasn't until recently I saw people arguing about it that I realized, well, technically no. And then I looked into the history of it and I was like, well, technically yes. So it's kind of crazy. What are your Advent practices? Do you fast at all? Do you give anything up? What do you do to prepare for Christmas? I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below. And Father Schmitz, if you're watching this, you know I love you. And I'm admitting that you're still technically correct. Anyway, guys, that's all I got this week. Stay tuned for a couple special announcements coming right up. So like I said, I feel a need to emphasize penance during the Advent season in my own life. Maybe you do too. And if you do, maybe you'd like to accompany me on my little Advent journey. So every year, I do a little media fast, and that basically means like really scaling back the amount of time I spend listening to music in the car, the amount of time I watch Netflix, and the amount of time I play video games. I try to make that like a zero sum and not do it at all, but you know, it's hard. So in the very least, I restrict all of my media activity to allow for a greater period of silence, which will then allow me for a greater period of reflection and prayer. But not only that, it gives me more time to read. And guys, I love reading. In fact, I just finished Abandonment to Divine Providence by Jean-Pierre de Caussade, and if you haven't read this, I highly, highly recommend it. But during Advent, I do something that I call the 4x4 challenge. And that basically means I try to read 4 books in 4 weeks, 1 book per week. And I'd love for you to join me on it. So if you'd like to start reading with me, you can. The first book I'm going to read is A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, and those who've been following the vlog, this is pretty self-explanatory. The second book I'm going to read is G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. It's just a lot of fun. I love G.K. Chesterton, and it's still a relatively short book, clocking in under 200 pages. The third book I want to read is called Discerning the Will of God by Father Gallagher. It goes with another book of his called The Discernment of Spirits, which I have read, but I never read Discerning the Will of God, and it's very appropriate for my own life. If you're anything like me, you're always struggling to figure out what God wants for you. So check this out for the third week of Advent. And for the final week of Advent, if you read nothing else this season, pick up A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I know that there are so many film adaptations out there. I love watching them up at Christmas Carol every year, but reading the book is incredible. Dickens just does a fantastic job capturing the gloominess and the bitterness of Scrooge, and at the same time, this incredible capacity for even the most sour person to convert. It's perfect for the Advent season, perfect to lead into Christmas. Now the caveat with that is, if you want to accompany me, we've got to start this weekend, November 26th. The way Advent falls this year is it begins next week on December 3rd, and the 4th Sunday of Advent is December 24th. But that's also the vigil of the Feast of the Nativity, so it won't give us a full week to read a book. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to be talking about these books like from here on out for the next few weeks. I hope you join me. They're a lot of fun to read, and I'd love to know your thoughts on them as well. And remember, we are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so comment 1K giveaway. Please like, subscribe, and share our channel. We need more subscribers. If we get to 1,000 subscribers by Christmas, we will be doing a t-shirt giveaway. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving, and I hope and pray you have a blessed Advent.